It's Yahoo Sports Jordan Shusterman. We're happy to have you. We have a lot of fun stuff to get to. I'm going to start with a debate that was raging this morning, not just on our morning show, Brock and Salk, but later how we started the show. And it's people being completely torn about whether or not it's a good or bad thing for Cal Raleigh to be in the home run derby. And Jordan, I will preface this, as I'm sure you know, that Cal had his first practice for the home run derby yesterday and then struck out 4 times in a game. I don't think it's impactful. Bump and many listeners, I'll say, disagree. What do you think?
So I think I come down somewhere in between, where I think being concerned that him participating will torpedo his entire season is definitely too overdramatic. I think what is very real, and I think Cal even said this yesterday, is that doing the home run derby is exhausting. And like, that is a very real thing. And so if you want to read into that and be like, why should the guy who's already doing more work than anyone else in baseball be extending himself to participate in something like this? The answer is because it's really cool. And at the end of the day, this is entertainment. And Cal Raleigh, I love that he is saying yes to this. I love that he's just all over the place, and we're seeing Big Dumper everywhere. So I understand there's a push and pull, and because he means so much to this team, anything to jeopardize that feels a little scary. But I'm also not surprised that the Mariners are like, yes, like, this is an incredible season, and this is a way to also be a part of this incredible season, is for him to be in the home run derby. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, home run, hitting bombs is cool. Yeah, I'm sure it's a wonderful feeling. I've never done it in a game.
Dingers are dope.
Dingers are dope. When it comes to this team as they stand right now, Emerson Hancock had himself a tough outing. It depends on how you look at it, right? It was loose for a little bit, but then kind of tightened some things up, and the Mariners weren't able to produce. Now he's sitting down. You got a reliever being called up. How do you foresee this rotation shaping out before the All-Star break?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, Hancock has been pretty solid recently, and that was a relatively rare hiccup, although it's not something, we haven't seen from him before. I certainly don't think that's the last we will see of Emerson Hancock this season. I think, this is more of a roster maneuverability situation where, especially coming off that day, you have these extra games this week, fewer off days. You want to make sure your bullpen is as long as possible. So a little bit disappointing just because it felt like Emerson had kind of started to find some solid ground. But again, I still expect to see him. I will be interested to see if Logan Evans can make a push to replace him at some point, how they kind of go back and forth between both of those guys. I think from a workload standpoint, I have to imagine they're a little bit more want to be a little bit more careful with Evans. So we'll see if he reemerges. But I think they're in an okay spot right now, all things considered.
I was hoping that we could throw a common listener question or concern, I'll say, your way and kind of see what you think about it. We can guess who you would assume will win the AL West. It's the team that's currently leading the AL West and has maybe the easiest schedule for the remainder of the season. That being said, we had a listener earlier this morning say, I feel like Seattle just lost the division yesterday. Like, they feel like at any point it's just kind of going to slip away. And I wanted to throw that concern your way. Maybe you have a devil's advocate argument, or maybe you just happen to see the AL West as being a bit closer than it feels right now, or maybe not. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so I think that the argument against Houston, and I pick Houston every year. I pick them again this year. I pick them to win the American League this year, not just the American League West. So what I'm about to say is, kind of going against what I've been consistent on, and obviously not what people want to hear. But if we're making the case against Houston, it is that they are now even more injured. Losing Jeremy Pena is a big deal. The fact that Yordan Alvarez does not appear anywhere close to coming back is a big deal. I think how well they've been pitching it is both impressive and not totally fluky, but you could also say that the depth for some of this pitching staff, like, listen, Fromber, Hunter Brown, Josh Hader, Brian Abreu, those are some of the best in the game, and there's really no refuting that. But some of the performances they've gotten beyond that is both a credit to them and also maybe not something that's necessarily going to sustain. So if you combine some of the injuries that they're now dealing with and kind of the depth of their staff and some of the guys that are performing at levels that maybe we aren't expecting to hang on, I do think Houston could come back to the pack, but at the same time, like, it is also going to rely on the Mariners just playing better and getting better, whether that's adding at the deadline, whether that's just certain players stepping up more. So Seattle clearly still needs to raise their game. I don't think Houston's going to run away with it just yet.
What is it that Houston is best known for, best at? Here, obviously, it's the arms, right? Developing these arms and whatnot in the prospects with 9 out of the top 100 in the farm system. But what is it about Houston? What is it? Is it their farm system? Is it their developing? What is it about Houston?
I'm so glad you asked, because it's such a great contrast, because the Astros have had terrible farm systems almost for this entire run. And then you remember, wait a minute, that's not what we're playing for. And having good prospects is really cool, but if you can find players that can give you, if you can turn Jake Myers into an above average major league outfielder, if you can, of course, make what is looking to be so far a pretty good trade, not that Kyle Tucker is not awesome, but as far as that trade is going to go, like, there was a lot of pressure to nail that. And yes, they matched up perfectly with the Cubs, considering where the Cubs were at, how desperate the Cubs were at. We were willing to include Cam Smith. But then, man, they nailed it on Isaac Paredes, too. He really has been as good as really you could possibly hope. So it's just kind of finding extra gears for guys at the big leagues level who weren't necessarily prospects. And I think, again, like I'm mentioning, what they've been able to get out of guys like Colton Gordon and Brandon Walter, who's, even on his second major league organization, I believe. And then just the bullpen. I mean, Steven Okert and, Brian King. This is honestly something that Seattle has maybe struggled with more so over the last couple of years relative to what they were doing, when they were in the postseason. Is, yes, you still have some Gabe Spires here and there, but Houston is finding impact at the major league level in ways that you aren't expecting. So even though they still have what is considered one of the weakest farm systems in baseball, they are doing a lot of things right at the highest level, and that's why they're in first place.
So I don't know how much you follow football. So they're the Philadelphia Eagles, is what you're saying. They're going out.
They can't keep getting away with this.
They're just plugging guys in and saying, let's get the most out of them.
I think so. Again, with football, I know it's like the Eagles, it's like they have the best roster, but that's also what's a little bit different with the Astros, is like not all of their moves are working out. And this is another thing about like why I think they're still vulnerable and not the team that they used to be. I mentioned Fromber not being there. Like, Christian Walker has been a catastrophe. Like, that's a player that I think a lot of Mariners fans thought would have been a good fit in Seattle, and he has not been that. And Jose Altuve is still useful, and his transition to the outfield has been interesting, and he's not the hitter that he used to be at all. So there are still holes on this team. There's still a lot of things that have not gone right for Houston. They still have a lot of injuries on the mound that they're dealing with. So, like I said, they are still no longer a super team, but at the same time, you have to give them credit to be able to find ways with a lot of new personnel to still be this far ahead in first place.
I wanted to stay with the theme of kind of developing farm systems, developing prospects, maybe trading prospects. It is such an interesting juxtaposition. The Astros kind of finding major league talent, either, having surprise developments or just getting guys that can help them win now and then continuing to keep that window open. Whereas the Mariners, on separate occasions, have developed great farm systems under Jerry Dipoto and yet have not been able to have it truly pay off. Do you think that they've just missed on some prospects and gotten unlucky? Do you think that they maybe don't part ways with prospects, that things don't line up? What do you see as something that you'd like them to tweak, just from an outsider's perspective?
Yeah, so there's still obviously like developmental wins on this Seattle staff. Now, another way to look at it, and this is certainly relevant in the month that we're talking, is, okay, well, how do they get Randy Arozarena? Randy Arozarena is playing some pretty good baseball right now, and that was because a trade that they were able to make with prospects that were not necessarily highly drafted in Brody Hopkins and Aiden Smith. And I know we're going to see Brody Hopkins in the Futures game. Like, he's probably going to have a good career, but like Randy Arozarena is a good big leaguer, and that's another. And Luis Castillo, another good example of that, right? Where you kind of had coalesced enough prospects to make a big deal like that. And so, while would it be nicer to have more of the major league breakouts that you aren't necessarily expecting? I think Luke Raley would kind of qualify as that last year, kind of a later career having a season like that. Yeah, that'd be good, especially on the mound and the bullpen where they've kind of been lacking. But especially looking forward, there is clearly, I think, going to be opportunities to some degree to use some of this farm system talent in a trade for now major league help. So we'll see what that looks like. Obviously, we'll have plenty of deadline conversations over the next few weeks, but that's kind of how I think you have to view it.
Speaking of deadline, there are only a few teams who we think consider themselves out of this thing when it comes to, I guess, both leagues. Do you foresee a team that is kind of in the mix right now, but they're showing you something that says, you know what, They're on the downfall. They might be sellers at the end of this thing.
I mean, we're moving in the wrong direction in terms of clarifying who's going to be sellers. I mean, I got my Marlins hat here behind me. Well, what are we supposed to make of these fighting fish? They can't stop winning. This was one of the teams we thought we would be able to absolutely be sure that they were going to be trading away pieces, and I assume that is still going to be the case, but maybe it's not as dramatic as you would expect. So, again, especially if we're just talking about moving relievers, I think even teams that are kind of on the fringes are going to be willing to do so. But I don't know, even Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh's starting to play better. Now, do I expect Pittsburgh or Miami to make the postseason? No, but it might delay their willingness at least a little bit longer until they start shipping pieces off. And then, even Arizona keeps bouncing back and forth. Baltimore is starting to play a little bit better. So, again, we are a long way away from really knowing who those sellers are going to be, but they will emerge. It will happen. There will be teams that start to play terribly leading up to the deadline. It happens every year, and we just have to kind of wait and see who that's really going to be.
Shifting gears away from what we're watching in the league right now for a broader look at a baseball topic. We had a fun debate yesterday about like the best and coolest things that can happen in a game. I thought I gave the correct ranking, and yet Bump was kind of convincing me against a few of these. I had perfect game as the coolest possible thing that could happen in a baseball game, regardless of situation, whether it's the World Series or game 1 of 162. And then I had no hitter. And after that was walk-off grand slam. But we also have on this list inside the park home run, which we saw recently in a Red Sox game, stealing home, a triple play. Some people were saying I was missing a few too, which I certainly was. The cycle I didn't have in there, robbing a home run I didn't have. Okay, your thoughts, Jordan.
Man, so this is a great debate. I think it's important to remove the game context because I think that is against the spirit of the discussion. Because to me, what you're kind of describing is like you happen to go to the ball game on I think about this often with Felix's perfect game, right? It's just a Wednesday afternoon against the Rays. It's like you're not expected to see anything special, even as much as we love Felix, and then that happens. I think perfect game 1 is correct. I think because of how many no-hitters we've had over the last decade, that definitely goes farther down. Especially some of these other ones are
like
really
never see
rare.
him.
Like triple plays.
I've never seen a triple play in person.
Yeah,
ever.
like triple plays. I actually, it's funny you mentioned this. I saw a straight steal of home this season for the first time in my life. Just seeing that, I believe it was. I think it was Jarren Duran, unless I'm totally blanking. I'm pretty sure it was Jarren Duran, but that is an exciting moment. Now, I think the thing about that is like that can happen and you can miss it. Like that's something where like you really got to be paying attention and you might miss it. Whereas like some of these other ones, like obviously you're going to know what is happening. So I guess my big picture takeaway is I think you are still underrating stealing home and you're underrating triple plays.
Fair takeaway.
I've seen a walk-off home run, not a walk-off grand slam, the Cows to send us to the playoffs, and that was, other than watching Julio go nuts at the Derby, that's the hypest I've ever been watching.
I should have had walk-off home run as its own separate. I wouldn't have it like top 3, but it should deserve its own because it is a cool thing to see in a park, right? Like just a big bang. A big bang to end the game. Jordan, tell us what can we expect from you this week?
Yeah, so I'm in full draft mode, to be honest. I'm working on my draft rankings, which will come out, my top 50 will come out early next week. And yeah, we're just in all-star planning mode, trade deadline mode, getting ready to head down to Atlanta. I am, of course, very excited to see Cal Raleigh in the home run derby and also just in the all-star game, which, of course, he will be there. So I'm looking forward to that. So, just in full all-star planning mode. I wrote about all the billion Dodgers pitchers yesterday, so you can go check that out. But otherwise, just keep an eye on Yahoo Sports and listen to Baseball Barbercast.
He is Jordan Shusterman. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, guys.